I'll be upfront about one thing. I'm an honest man. I say that because it's important context for everything that follows. I married Willow knowing exactly how she had come into my life. She had inserted herself into the space my first marriage left open, piece by piece, until she occupied all of it. Because of the way she arrived, she was consumed by the fear that someone else might do the same to her. This anxiety expressed itself in what I can only describe as a comprehensive surveillance operation conducted against her own husband. My phone had no password. It never did, because she'd made clear early on that a password was essentially a confession. She conducted random inspections at any hour, scrolling through everything with the focused efficiency of an auditor who suspects fraud. When I left the house, she required real-time updates on my location and company. Silence, lasting more than an hour, triggered a mandatory video call. Every night before bed, she conducted what she called a check, which required me to stand there while she looked me over for evidence of things I had not done. I am an honest man. I want to be clear about that. But after years of living inside her particular brand of devotion, something in me reached its limit. So I did something stupid. I opened a message thread with Sophia, my ex-wife, currently living abroad, historically unreliable in the fidelity department, and typed, "Sophia, honestly, I've never stopped thinking about you. All these years." I sent it. Then I waited. What came back was not what I expected. "George," she wrote, "I'll be honest too. I gave birth to 2 sons for you while we were apart. Are you willing to be their father?" I stared at the message for a long moment. I replied, "Unsubscribe. Willow is my second wife, and she is 10 years my junior, which in practical terms means her emotional landscape has the intensity and volatility of weather systems I was not trained to forecast. From the beginning, she demanded total transparency, not as a request, but as a structural requirement of the marriage. Whatever she asked, I gave her because in the early days I was thoroughly disarmed by how young and pretty she was and simply went along with whatever she said. But the appetite for reassurance only grew. On the larger end of the scale, if I mentioned meeting someone female, she wanted to know the woman's age, appearance, and comparative measurements. On the smaller end, she reviewed my spending records, cross-referenced receipts, and expected a running commentary on my whereabouts whenever I stepped outside. There was also the nightly homework check, the details of which I will spare, except to say that any indication of insufficient effort on my part sent her imagination spiraling into elaborate theories about what I had been doing instead. Once I pushed back, I asked her flatly whether she trusted me at all. She cried. She told me there were too many temptations in the world, that she was terrified I would stumble into the arms of some calculating woman who knew exactly how to exploit a man's weaknesses. In her telling of it, I was a fundamentally vulnerable creature barely keeping himself together in a world full of predators. I found this both insulting and, in some technical sense, slightly touching. Mostly insulting. There was nothing to do but absorb her anxiety and spend energy making her feel secure, which I did consistently for years. I became an expert in the particular art of managing Willow. Our first wedding anniversary arrived, and I made the mistake of serving food to my son before serving her. This registered as a grievance. Willow's method of expressing grievances was not shouting or cold shoulders. It was nutritional aggression. She began feeding me goji berries and grilled oysters with the patient determination of a woman making a point. I understood the point completely, because our relationship had always operated more on physical honesty than on emotional delicacy. Sweet words never landed the way actions did with Willow. By the time the sun came up, we were both in the bathtub, and one of us was still trying to remember how to breathe normally while the other had recovered completely and was ready to conduct an inquiry. She traced a slow circle on my chest. "Do you know where you went wrong?" I considered the most diplomatic available answer. "I didn't kiss you when I came home." She said I was wrong. Why I had actually done wrong, she explained, with a smile at a girl who had stopped me to ask a question. This girl had called me by a nickname, Geo Big Brother, in what Willow described as a sickening tone. I worked through my memory until I landed on who she meant. A 17-year-old, my teacher's daughter. She had come to ask me something academic and left again within minutes. I said this. Willow pressed herself further into my arms, her voice soft with grievance. She said that when she first got together with me, she herself had just turned 18. She knew what girls that age were capable of. She had been won. She wasn't fooled. I had to acknowledge, silently and without saying so out loud, that she had a point. When Willow wants to make an argument against herself, she does not spare herself in the process. The year I met her, my first marriage was disintegrating. Sophia and I had been paired off by our families without ever having met. One of those arrangements where the ceremony happens before the relationship, and the relationship never quite catches up. She wanted to study abroad. I paid for it and let her go, assuming it was temporary. It wasn't. She built a life overseas and stayed in it, while I stayed home managing a business and fielding increasingly pointed observations from both families about the absence of children and the apparent failure of everyone involved to produce any. My mother-in-law sent me a video once. It featured a young man who had quit a stable civil service position in his own city and restarted his career from scratch in his girlfriend's city, purely to be with her. The accompanying message, delivered with complete seriousness, was that a capable man finds solutions. The implication being that I should abandon my domestic career and begin again from zero in a foreign country where I did not speak the language, to be closer to a wife who had a full life and showed no particular urgency about having me nearby. They also mentioned, while they were at it, that Sophia's childhood companion Ito had proposed to her before we married and she had turned him down. They framed this as a piece of relevant history. I framed it as a sign that I had reached the end of something. I booked a flight abroad without telling anyone, carrying a divorce agreement in my bag. On the way there, I was robbed, aggressively and thoroughly. They left me standing in the street in a pair of red boxer shorts, stripped of everything else: money, phone, bags, dignity. I did not speak French. No amount of gesturing produced useful results. At the bottom of this particular situation, I found Willow. She was a university student, young and bright-faced, carrying the uncomplicated warmth of someone who hasn't yet learned to protect herself against other people's problems. She translated for me, lent me her phone, gave me money to buy clothes, and then, noticing that I was comprehensively miserable, asked if I wanted to join her group for the remaining days of her vacation. 3 days with her, I had visibly improved. I had, in fact, mostly forgotten why I had come, until Sophia found out about the robbery through mutual connections and tracked me down through considerable effort. When she appeared, Willow stepped away to give us space. Before leaving, she said to me, easily and without drama, "Gio, whatever you do, put yourself first. There are so many women in this world. Losing one isn't the end of anything." That single sentence dissolved something I had been holding rigid for more than 20 years. When Sophia found out I had come specifically to divorce her, she became angry in the particular way she had when she felt wronged by circumstance. She said I was trying to force her into a corner to make her quit her career and come home and become someone's housewife. She said she wasn't my accessory. She asked me to respect her choices. She refused to sign. So the matter dragged on, as matters do when one party refuses to resolve them. I stayed abroad for a while, genuinely trying to repair things. I took her on dates that were interrupted halfway through when her boss called. I stopped taking her on dates. During that period, Willow was a constant and comfortable presence. Younger than me, undemanding, easy to talk to. She understood me in a way that felt effortless. She called me Gio Big Brother and told me stories about her classes and always seemed to have something useful to say. She invited me to her school performance one afternoon. I bought flowers and went, feeling like a benevolent older figure doing a kind thing for a younger friend. Willow was good at the piano, genuinely good, the kind that stops a room. When I went up to give her the flowers afterward, she stood on her tiptoes and kissed my cheek. She explained immediately that it was a local custom. Friends did it all the time, nothing to read into it. I didn't read into it. I took her and her classmates to dinner. At some point during the meal, one of them said something, and Willow replied with a bright smile, and I asked what had been said. She told me, after a pause, "They said we look very close." The sentence had the quality of something that was technically complete, but structurally unfinished. I said, "Of course we are." After that, our meetings went from weekly to every 3 days to daily. I was spending more time with Willow in those weeks than I had spent with my wife in months. I didn't identify this as a problem. I just felt good. Happy, even, which was an emotion I had mostly stopped keeping track of. Sophia, around this period, began making efforts. More physical closeness, more attention, some enthusiastic experimentation with role play that I will summarize only as unexpectedly engaging. She played a nervous student, and I played an excessively stern professor, and we were both convincing enough that it was genuinely thrilling. Then she reverted completely. Separate rooms, no contact, as though the preceding warmth had not happened at all. Before I could figure out what to do with that, a company crisis pulled me home. I sent Willow a rushed message and flew back to find the business approaching collapse. I couldn't eat or sleep. I got seriously ill, the kind of ill that raises questions about whether you're going to be fine. The first person through the hospital door was not Sophia. It was Willow. She looked at me with distress that seemed genuine and uncalculated. She said I had lost too much weight and said several sharp things about my ex-wife's priorities. During my recovery, a housekeeper managed things during the day, and Willow came in the evenings. She cooked for me, learned massage, washed my clothes, and returned them folded. She learned from the nurses what foods would help most and made them. Sophia eventually came back, cast on her arm, looking worn out, claiming she'd been in a car accident and hadn't told me to avoid causing worry. She stayed 2 days. Then she said her work required her to leave again, but that this would be the last time. Willow finished her degree ahead of schedule. Her father helped cover the company's losses, which told me something about the family's resources. She continued caring for me with the naturalness of someone who had been doing it for years. Sophia was kidnapped before my surgery, or so I was told, until I saw news of her photograph with Ito under circumstances that defied innocent explanation. My blood pressure, already unreliable, became worse. The surgery date moved up. As they wheeled me toward the operating room, Willow was the only one there. I asked her to find someone to prepare a divorce agreement. When Sophia rushed back, I presented it immediately. She cried and said everything was explainable. I told her I'd heard enough explanations. 3 days of back and forth, and she signed. For months later, she told me she'd given birth to my son. The test confirmed it. That explained the entire pattern. Why she'd let the story with Ito circulate without correcting it. Why she'd refused the divorce so long. She was buying time, protecting something I hadn't known existed. She gave me the child without argument, as I had expected. Willow took over his care with the completeness of someone who had been preparing for the role. She was extraordinary with him. I had understood by then what she felt for me. I had understood it for a while and had been married, so I had not acted on it. Once the company was stable and things had settled, I said it plainly and asked her to marry me. She said yes. Not long after, we had the wedding. I decided the time had come to have a serious talk with her about the control. It had become genuinely unmanageable. I had plans the following week to go with friends for a massage, the kind of establishment where the menu was, let's say, broader than standard. I was going purely out of curiosity. I was not going to do anything improper. I'm an honest man. I found Willow in the study. The moment she saw me, she pressed a book over something she'd been looking at, and a flicker of something crossed her face that I had never seen there before, something close to panic. Willow does not panic. Willow clings to me in every available moment and posts about it online. This was different. I shelved my concern for the moment and said what I had come to say, that her need to control me had gone too far and I wanted it to ease off. What happened next surprised me. She wrapped her arm through mine, looked briefly at my bare ring finger, and said quietly that she was sorry. She had just been afraid I would get tired of her. She mentioned a friend whose husband had left her for someone else. He had beaten his pregnant wife in the process. She had barely survived. I absorbed this. I told her, with appropriate gravity, that she didn't need to worry. I was not that kind of man. Even in a divorce scenario, I would never raise a hand to her. She was quiet for a moment. Then she asked where my wedding ring was. I said it was in the bedroom. Too tight, uncomfortable. I bought it for how it looked rather than how it would actually feel to wear every day. She smiled and produced 2 gold bands she'd apparently seen and bought on impulse. She said we should wear these instead. I was genuinely moved. I made her a solemn promise. I would never keep a mistress. Not in this lifetime. She kissed me. She said she believed me. Then she straddled my lap and turned off the light, and what followed was one of those experiences that reminds you why you make the decisions you make. Willow has a gift in this area. After more than 3 years of marriage, she still finds ways to surprise me. And every time my optimism turns out to be justified. I cannot move properly for an entire week afterward. My waist, my legs, both hands. She had dismantled me completely. Several days later, Willow was called back to her family home. Her father issued a direct order, and she had no choice. In the small window of time before she left, she kissed me approximately 40 times and promised to return immediately. Once she was gone, I felt, I won't pretend otherwise, a mild giddiness, a sense of space, a breath of air. I dropped a message in the group chat. Bar tonight. My treat. The response was not what I had hoped for. The last time they'd gone to a bar with me, Willow had apparently reported the establishment, which was subsequently closed for regulatory review. One friend had spent the evening drinking milk. Another said my wife's presence was felt even when she wasn't physically there, because her informants apparently were. The general consensus was that going anywhere with me was not worth the aftermath. I told them she was at her parents'. Nothing to worry about. Come out. They materialized within the hour. By 10 that night, the bar was loud and expensive, and everything was going well until I went to pay and remembered that every transaction on my main card triggered an alert to Willow's phone. I had told her, half an hour earlier, that I was already asleep. I rummaged through my wallet and found an old card. A joint account from my first marriage, Sophia's and mine, opened years ago, almost forgotten. There was well over $1 million in it. I thought briefly about whether Sophia would notice a large withdrawal and concluded that we were divorced and it was not her concern. I swiped through the balance without much ceremony. In the bathroom, I found a message from Sophia. A single question mark. Drunk, I explained that I had spent the money on formula for our son. Sophia. Full name Sophia Kim. Excellent figure. Famously cold expression. Person whose judgment I have historically respected despite everything. Replied that she had eyes and could read a spending location. She observed that formula had apparently become very expensive at bars, and that I appear to have become the thoroughly domesticated type I used to make fun of. I assessed the situation and decided to mock her back. I suggested that she seemed unusually invested in my life and asked whether she might still have feelings for me. She took 3 full minutes to respond, then replied one word at a time. Shut up. And that's a joint account. Pay it back. I blocked her. The bar's truth or dare game, as these things go, extracted more from me than I had intended to give. When asked who had been my true love, I said honestly, Sophia. I had seen a photograph of her before our blind date and fallen completely without meeting her. I never told anyone that. When asked who the love of my heart was, I said, Willow. She had made herself indispensable to me in every practical sense and had fulfilled things I had not even known to articulate as wants. For my dare, I was told to send my wife a confession message. I wrote it myself, every word, nothing borrowed from the internet. I was fairly moved by my own sincerity. Willow called immediately. I found a quiet corner, signaled the DJ to cut the music, and answered. She said, Then, you're not home, are you? I said our son had won a KFC and wouldn't stop crying. I'd had no choice but to go out. At 2 years old, he was at precisely the right age to be a credible alibi. Willow considered this. She told me to dress warmly and come home soon. Before hanging up, she said she loved me too. I stood in the bar and thought about how lucky I was that she was devoted rather than calculating. If she had been playing any kind of game, I would have lost it completely by now. Willow's return was delayed by a day. She apologized over the phone with the excessive sincerity she brings to everything. My son, who had been lying in bed performing illness to avoid doing anything, sprang fully upright the moment I mentioned KFC and announced he was entirely recovered. I noticed something when he climbed out of bed, a notebook tucked inside his comic book. Something about it nagged at me. I asked where he'd found it. He said the study, mixed in with his comics. I sent him off to get his shoes and took the notebook to the bedroom. I sat on the edge of the bed and gave myself a moment to prepare for whatever was inside, reminding myself that whatever I found, I was looking for a reason to act, not confirmation of what I already suspected. Then I opened it. Willow's handwriting. Diary entries, sporadic, dating back to the year we met. The first entry described a game she had lost, which required her to confess to a man wearing the same color as her. She was wearing a red dress and was calculating her odds of escape when she spotted a foreigner who had just been robbed, frantic and stranded, wearing red boxer shorts. That was how it began, apparently. My lucky red underwear was the origin point of my second marriage. I turned pages. She had found out I was married and claimed not to feel much about it. Her friends reported that she got drunk and ran to a bridge saying she wanted to die for love. She dismissed this as their joke. Then she heard about the divorce. She got drunk again, they said, and this time knelt on the bridge and prayed. This time they recorded it. She told herself it was a second personality. I kept reading through the mundane entries, birds, weather, minor complaints, and then I found it. She had arranged for Sophia's car to be intercepted. The robbery of Sophia's documents. The hackers who had triggered the company crisis. The scandal with Ito. She had arranged all of it. The notebook slipped from my hands. I looked down at where it had fallen open on the floor, the most recent page. She wrote that she wanted to be with me every waking hour, but held herself back because she feared annoying me. The rings she had custom-made contained tracking chips. She had also modified phones and watches. There was a version that could be implanted under the skin, but she had judged me too sharp to fool with that. I sat on the floor for a while. Then I remembered our wedding. After we had both said I do and exchanged rings, she had looked at me with that radiant smile and said, "Husband, I will never leave you. And you won't leave me either, will you? I've already bought our burial plots and the urns." I had laughed. I had said I'd have someone set diamonds into hers. I thought she was being charming. I had once, years ago, watched videos online about obsessive love archetypes and casually said to someone that having a woman like that would be exciting. I had thought I was being funny. Fate, it seems, has no sense of irony. Willow came home that evening and clung to me for a kiss, and I held myself very still, every muscle conscious of itself. I had gone online in the intervening hours. The reading material was not reassuring. Iron cages, basements, ankle restraints. The literature on this personality type was vivid and specific. I went to the basement. There was an iron cage, large enough for a bed. The accessories were already present. Willow noticed I was different. She came and pressed her hand to my forehead and asked if I was unwell. I manufactured a laugh and said I wanted to eat her cooking. She relaxed and went to the kitchen. I texted my friend. "My wife is not entirely normal." He replied, "You're only figuring this out now?" Everyone, it turned out, had known. They had assumed, given how cheerful I always seemed, that I was into this particular type of dynamic and had made an informed choice. I informed them this was not the case. I told him I wanted a divorce. He asked if I thought she'd agree. Neither of us thought she would. Life continued with its surface appearances intact. Dinner was on the table. My son was excited about the menu. Willow moved around the kitchen with her usual competence and care. I stood in the doorway and felt the strange grief of watching someone who has genuinely, destructively, completely loved you. That night in the bathroom, I applied maximum effort to avoiding detection. Willow told me I was impressive. I felt absurdly gratified despite everything. Afterward, her phone was charging, and she picked up mine to look something up. Before I could react, she accidentally opened the message thread. At the top was a text from an unknown number. "Is your wife home? Want to come over? My friend." The earlier messages had been deleted. The new ones were still there. Willow's voice went careful and flat. She asked who it was. I called it spam and went on the offensive, asking whether she was accusing me of something, whether we were doing this again, pinching the bridge of my nose and suggesting we both needed to calm down. She looked at me with narrowed eyes and said I seemed very guilty and that she would look for herself if I wouldn't tell her. She absolutely could look for herself. I made a rapid assessment and scooped her up before she could act on the thought, and the evening extended considerably beyond what I had planned. I recovered the phone. The messages were deleted. Willow did not pursue the question. I needed to leave. I needed outside assistance. And outside assistance meant Sophia, which meant finding an excuse to contact her. I pulled her out of the blacklist and typed, "Our son misses you." She replied, "Have him call me Mom." He did not know who she was. He had never met her. He could not miss her. I tried again. "Sophia, I won't pretend anymore. Honestly, I've never forgotten you all these years." Willow video called before Sophia responded. I answered, managed the conversation, and finally got off the call. Sophia's reply was waiting. "George, I won't pretend either. I actually had twins. You have another son. Do you believe me?" I replied, "Unsubscribe." Whatever she was doing, I wasn't in the right frame of mind for it. I want to pick up my son. I briefly considered just taking him and disappearing, and then concluded that Willow would intercept us before we cleared the airport. I had driven maybe 10 minutes when my son observed, in the casual way of small children detonating information, that the red car behind us looked like one of Mom's. The license plate was unfamiliar. My phone buzzed. Sophia calling. I answered. Her voice was cool. "Pull over." She was alone. She said she had expected me not to believe her, and that was fine, because once I met Leo, the first would understand. They were twins. Identical. It would be self-explanatory. My son tugged my hand and asked why this woman was asking him to call her Mom. Sophia crouched down, her composure holding by about half, and explained. She and I had been married. We had divorced. She had raised one son, and I had raised the other. He considered this, and said his mom was Willow, and that was enough. Sophia pressed her lips together and said nothing. She stood up and asked what I planned to do. I said, "Leave, and then divorce." She asked if I was sure. I said I was, and then said I was sorry for having doubted her before. She said it was too late for that, and asked if I regretted divorcing her originally. I thought about it honestly. I shook my head. Something about that answer bothered her. She looked away, lowered her face, and said very quietly, "I regret it." Despite everything, she helped me go back and collect what I needed. We packed quickly. Then Willow's message came through. She had bought my favorite salmon. She was coming home soon. She would cook for me. She was sorry about the night before. She would change. She loved me. I steeled myself and replied, "Willow, I know everything. I want a divorce." I blocked all her contacts, left the gold ring on the table, and walked out. A week passed. The two boys circled each other warily at first, and then, in the way of children who share a face, discovered they were fascinated by each other. Sophia and I talked properly, maybe for the first time. She told me she had hidden the pregnancy because she knew both families would use the child as leverage to end her career and pull her home. Looking at her now, the priorities had clearly shifted. She was present with the boys in a way that hadn't been available to her before. The boys asked once while she was peeling fruit whether we had remarried. She wiped their mouths and let the question settle unanswered. We didn't discuss it ourselves either. I'll be upfront about one thing. I'm an honest man. I say that because